Hey, welcome back for another video. Today we're going to talk about this article that I found. Oh, not this one. Is it? Hold on. This article that I found, talking about what the rich are really doing with their money right now. And so I think this is something important that we all can learn from as we're following others, money moves. So, before we jump into that, I want to quickly take a brief look at the US dollar. Alright, so this is just my analysis here on the dollar. I'm going to take off some of these drawings so we can see what's actually happening here. So, we've had our harmonic retracement, okay, and now price is just situated here at the 102 level. Now, what I'd like to see is for price to maybe touch down more to about the 99 level before reaching back up to continue the overall move. Now, this is what we're looking at on the monthly. All right. So if you know about like zone breakouts and things like that, like this was a zone that we were in. We broke out here at the end of 2022, so the end of last year, and we've had a retracement here. So now we're just waiting for something in the news to kind of kick it off, or something that could kick it off and continue to push price upward. Okay. All right. So let's go take a quick look in the news. At what we're seeing. All right, so all of these things are here that are really affecting the US dollar. Let's take a look at this one here. Oh, shoot. 1 second, guys. All right, so, and we're back. So I just signed up for Reuters again, so we can continue to read through the articles. Okay, so we found this article, the Dow S&P 500 falls, Disney, PacWest leads regional banks lower. Okay, so PacWest reports deposits fell 9.5% last week. Energy shares fall with oil prices. Dow down 0.7%, S&P 500 down 0.2%, and the Nasdaq up 0.2%. And that's up today, May 11th. So the Dow and the S&P 500 ended lower on Thursday, dragged down by Walt Disney as it lost subscribers, while PacWest led declines in regional banks after posting a drop in deposits, lifting the Nasdaq. Shares of Alphabet Inc. or Google rose 4.3% a day after Google rolled out more artificial intelligence products to take on competition for Microsoft. So Microsoft shares eased 0.7% and were among the biggest negative influences on the S&P 500 Nasdaq. PacWest shares dropped 22.7% after it reported its deposits fell 9.5% last week, and that it had posted more collateral to the U.S. Federal Reserve to post its liquidity. Other regional bank shares fell as well as the news revived worries about the industry's health following the recent collapse of 3 regional lenders. The KB Regional Bank Index ended down 2.4%. I don't think you can say that it's a widespread issue. It's still very much bank by bank, but it's very likely to be more consolidation and more headaches for regional bank investors. All right, so this is really, talking about the stocks, and the stocks, as you know, are fairly inclusive with, the dollar. And maybe that's something we can start to discuss and talk about. Is how the dollar fluctuates with the stock exchange and things like that. Just from looking at it purely from a chart view or perspective. So the energy sector fell along with declines in oil prices. Tesla's shares jumped after finding a new CEO. Okay, cool. Shares ended up 2.1%. Okay, so after Tesla owner Elon Musk tweeted that he found a new chief executive for Twitter, Tesla shares ended up 2.1%. So the FDIC, or Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, said around 113 of the largest lenders will bear the cost of replenishing the $16 billion in coverage of the agency that has forked out for the crisis. Also continuing to keep investors on edge was a standoff in Washington over raising the U.S. debt ceiling. Ooh, okay, so I think that might be an interesting one. Let's click on that here, because that's definitely going to affect the dollar. So as we wrap up, as we get closer and closer to the debt ceiling deadline, you're going to have more volatility. Volume on U.S. exchanges was 10.05 billion shares compared with 10.69 billion. Full session average on the last 20 trading days. Declining issues outnumbered advancers on the New York Stock Exchange. Okay, so all this is like a lot of stock stuff that I'm still learning on how to understand. But I want to take a look at the debt ceiling because I know that this has always been a major issue, and it's going to continue to affect, the amount of inflation that we experience, the recession that we experience, and maybe even moves in the cryptocurrency space as we continue to grow and thrive out there. So let's just take a quick little break, and we'll be right back. Okay, so let's get back to it. So we're talking about the U.S. dollar debt ceiling, or the U.S. debt ceiling. So let's see. It says Japan says G7 may discuss U.S. debt crisis, ready to respond. Biden warns of U.S. recession unless ceiling raised quickly. G7 to debate ways to strengthen global banking system. China's slowing inflation adds to global recession fears. Yellen wants G7 debate on restricting investment to China. Okay. All right, so it says a standoff in Washington over raising the U.S. debt ceiling overshadowed a meeting of Group of Seven, or G7 finance leaders starting on Thursday, heightening U.S. recession fears as central banks seek a soft landing for the global economy. The central bank governor of host Japan said the U.S. debt crisis may be discussed at the G7 gathering, adding the group must stand ready to respond to any market repercussions. I have faith U.S. authorities will do their best to prevent it from happening. Kazuo Ueda told reporters on Thursday when asked about the chance of the United States defaulting on its debt. The immediate fallout is something U.S. authorities would have to deal with, but the G7 group will likely scrutinize the situation and respond as needed, he said, adding that Japanese authorities were watching developments closely. So, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen was expected to face questions from her G7 counterparts meeting in the Japanese city of Niigata on how Washington intends to prevent turbulence in financial markets already jittering after the recent failure of 3 U.S. regional banks and strains in Europe. A default would threaten the gains that have we've worked so hard to make over the past few years in our pandemic recovery, and it would spark a global downturn that would set us back much further. President Joe Biden has signaled the chance of canceling his trips to next week's G7 summit if the debt standoff is not solved in time, warning that failure to raise the limit on the government's permitted borrowing from the current $31.4 trillion could throw the U.S. economy into recession. The U.S. debt crisis is a headache for Japan, which is this year's G7 chair and the world's biggest holder of U.S. debt. The G7 won't be able to come up with a solution for what is purely domestic and political U.S. problem, though the group could reaffirm its resolve to cooperate in stabilizing markets in the worst case scenario, said Takahata Kiyoshi, an analyst at sorry, I said it like that, Nomura Research Institute. Or, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Okay, so Washington is slowly responsible to get this fixed, but when things go wrong, all the other countries bear the brunt. Global outlook dampens. The logo of the G7, okay, so this is their logo for G7 finance ministers and central bank governors. All right, so the G7 finance chiefs meet at a time when aggressive US and European monetary tightening begin to weigh on global growth and stoke fears of financial instability. After the recent failure of survival of several U.S. banks, the G7 will discuss ways to strengthen the global financial system and combat risks of digital bank runs, Japanese officials say. Simmering U.S. and China tensions also cloud the outlook for the global economy that is already under pressure from signs of weakness in the world's second largest economy, which is China. Yellen told a news conference that Washington had been considered the chance of imposing restrictions on outbound investment to China to counter its economic coercion against other countries. The United States hoped to discuss the idea with its G7 allies at this week's meeting, she added. Signs that the China's post-COVID recovery may be flagging are clouding policymakers' hopes that a rebound in the country's demand would underpin global growth. China's consumer prices rose at the slowest pace in more than 2 years in April, while factory gate deflation deepened, data showed on Thursday. Other key themes to be discussed at the G7 finance gathering include steps to prevent Russia from circumventing sanctions over its invasion of Ukraine and diversifying supply chains away from China through partnerships with low and middle income nations. All right. Okay, so among other issues, Brazilian Finance Minister Fernando Haddad told reporters after meeting with Yellen that he expressed serious concerns that Argentina's economic challenges could usher in an extremist government. He said Argentina needed the assistance of International Monetary Fund, or IMF. The United States is the largest shareholder in the global lender. Okay, so, all right, let's just keep reading through and we're going to break it down. So, past U.S. debt ceiling fights have typically ended with a hastily arranged agreement in the final hours of negotiations, avoiding an unprecedented default. In 2011, the scramble prompted the first downgrade of the top notch U.S. credit rating. Veterans of that battle warned that the current situation is riskier because political divides have widened. Back then, the G7 finance leaders said in a statement that they were committed to addressing the tensions stemming from the current challenges on our fiscal deficits, debt, and growth. Okay, so basically, it looks like they're trying to figure it out. It looks like U.S. tensions between U.S. and China have been a strain on the global economy, and meaning, the two largest economies being at war with each other, when previously in the past, as we might remember, everything was made in China. So I think that is something that significantly could weigh on the economy. All right, and so Washington considered the chance of imposing restrictions on outbound investments to China to counter its economic coercion against other countries. The U.S. hoped to discuss the idea with G7 allies at this week's meeting. So they're having a meeting. Let's pull it up on Forex Factory, because they do have like releases and things like that. All right, so this will be the last thing we look at for this video, but let's see. Okay, so it said that they had their meetings. Oh, but we're a day behind here. All those meetings are like overseas somewhere, and they're like, it's Thursday, and really over there it's Friday. Okay, so I'm not seeing G7 meetings on here yet. So when do they take place? Oh, maybe there's just not any economic news that's going to be discussed from this. Okay, so I'm not seeing the G7 meetings on the economic calendar. However, what we'll do is we'll just keep going through this article. Instead of this week's meeting, but maybe they just don't have it on the economic calendar. That's just kind of how the dire straits go for the economy. All right, so other key themes include steps to prevent Russia from circumventing sanctions over its invasion of Ukraine and diversifying supply chains away from China through partnerships with low and middle income nations. So I guess that's where they were talking about where Argentina can come in at, because it is a developing nation, and some people might consider it a third world country or something like that. But ideally, it sounds like the U.S. government, in the midst of geopolitical wars, is trying to diversify their portfolio and bring some of the money out of China and putting it into other countries around the world. All right, so that wraps it up for this video. It looks like Yep, that wraps it up for this video. So it looks like there's going to be some more information coming out with the International Monetary Fund, and U.S. being a major stakeholder in that nation or in that organization is going to be really important for us to hold on to and pay attention to in the news. All right, so thank you for watching this video, and I will catch you on the next one. See you soon.